This channel focuses pretty heavily on handheld PC gaming systems like the Steam Deck, like the Lenovo Legion Go, or the ASUS ROG Ally. And honestly, those are my preferred way to play games most of the time. But sometimes maybe you want to have a bigger screen, or you want to use a mouse and keyboard, or maybe you just want to have more power to play games at maybe higher frame rates, which is why today I'm talking about using laptops instead. Specifically, this laptop, the 2024 ROG Zephyrus G16 laptop from ASUS. Now, full transparency here, ASUS did send me this laptop for free, but I'm sending it back when I'm done reviewing it. ASUS doesn't get to see this video ahead of time, and they get no input at all on the content of the video. With that out of the way, let's get started. And while I tell you about the specs of this laptop, let's take a look at it beside some things that you know how big they are, just so you can get a visual idea of what footprint this thing is going to have on your desk. The G16 laptop comes in a few different configurations. The one that I have has an Intel Core i9-185H CPU, which operates by default at between 28 to 45 watts of power. It's got 16 cores and 22 threads. The GPU in this is the NVIDIA RTX 4080 chip. It also has 32 gigs of RAM. It's got a 90 watt-hour battery. It comes with a 240 watt power adapter and a 16-inch OLED screen, which I will talk about all on its own later on down the line. So I want to first point out that, well, first of all, I'm not a benchmark guy. If you want benchmarks, there's a million channels out there that do that. I prefer to talk about the experience of actually playing games on it right out of the box. So yes, there are ways that I can improve the numbers that I'm getting here, but I wanted to say this is what it's like for the average user to go to a store, buy it, open it up, and install their games. So what I did is I loaded up a few of my favorite power-hungry games to see how this laptop could handle them. Let's start with Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is great because it's super scalable. You can run that game on the Steam Deck and other handhelds at lower resolutions, and it plays really, really well. But if you want to really push it, man, it can look stunning. So here you can see that I am murdering demons in Sanctuary at around 100 frames per second. I was running the game at 2560 by 1600 using the Ultra presets with ray tracing settings set to medium. Switching over to Cyberpunk 2077, holding steady around 60 frames per second. I've got the game running at 1920 by 1200, and I used the ray tracing medium preset as well. Then you've got last year's Game of the Year, Baldur's Gate 3. I've got to point out that I don't have a save file that takes you to the city of Baldur's Gate, and I know that that game, in that game, performance in the city is significantly lower than in the rest of the game. But in Act 1, playing at 2560 by 1600 and everything pretty much on high, I was able to maintain well over 60 frames per second. Finally, I installed Street Fighter 6. Again, runs pretty well on most hardware, but I really wanted to see how well I could push it. And at 2560 by 1440, I wanted to choose a higher resolution, but it was grayed out for some reason. Anyway, at that resolution on ultra settings, I was able to get a locked 60 frames per second, though for some reason I got gray bars on the top and the bottom of the screen instead of black bars, and on an OLED screen that is a huge disappointment. Black pixels are invisible on an OLED display, so why Street Fighter 6 is filling in those black pixels with gray is absolutely beyond me. Now, I can totally understand Capcom not having a 16 by 10 aspect ratio, but gray bars for letterboxing, no thank you. I fired up Borderlands 3 to see how it would run at 2560 by 1600 on ultra settings, and I was averaging around 75 frames per second. Let's talk ports, because this is a laptop and it does a lot more than just play games, so it's important to have a good selection of ports so you can do a lot with the laptop. You do have USB-C on both sides, which I love, though on the left-hand side, it's actually a Thunderbolt 4 port, and on the right-hand one is a Type-C USB 3.2 port. Also on the right side, you have a Type-A USB 3.2 port, an SD card reader. On the left-hand side, you have an HDMI 2.1 port, as well as another Type A USB 3.2 port. And then there's also where your headphone port is. And more importantly, the power. Now, my desk setup for my MacBook, I use one USB-C Thunderbolt cord from my CalDigit hub. It's plugged into the left side of my Mac. And yes, I can also do this on the Windows laptop as well, but that cord just doesn't deliver enough power when you're playing the games. So the games, they just don't run as well when you're using Thunderbolt to charge it. It isn't a deal breaker, but that does mean that if you're traveling with this laptop, then you also have to think about bringing this big ass charging brick with you. It's big, it's heavy, it's 240 watts, big brick. Moving on to audio, this laptop has some pretty decent speakers for a laptop, and they are laptop speakers, which means they're not going to win any awards or anything. If you're really serious about getting good quality sound out of a laptop, then you are not using laptop speakers. You're going to use headphones, which is why this laptop has a headphone jack on the left-hand side. And it's great that it has a headphone jack because the fans are loud. When you are pushing this laptop hard, the fans are going to make a lot of noise. That being said, I just tend to throw on my favorite wired headphones, which are the Audio-Technica AT-H-M50X, or my favorite wireless headphones, which are the SteelSeries Arctis Nova Pros, and the fan noise, it just melts away, as does everything else. In fact, I was playing Cyberpunk 2077 at my desk on the laptop. I had my headphones on, and my wife snuck up on me and scared the hell out of me because I was so immersed in the game. And the reason that I was so immersed in the game is because of the screen on this laptop. This has to be one of the best screens I have ever seen on a laptop. We'll get to the screen in a minute, but first I want to talk about heat. I was very worried by running a 4080 chipset in a laptop, especially one that's relatively thin, would make it hot to the touch. And the fans are going crazy, blowing very hot air out the back of the laptop. They are doing a fantastic job at cooling it. In fact, it isn't hot to the touch at all when you are actually using it. I mostly play games with a controller anyway, but if you're putting your hands on the laptop when you're playing a game, you don't really feel the heat where your hands would normally rest. You know, but up near the screen, near the back of the laptop, it is much hotter. Hot enough, in fact, that my brain tells my hand, hey, don't do that. Stop touching it when I'm actually touching it. It didn't burn me, but my brain didn't want to take any chances with my fingers, so I listened anyway. The screen, however, that is what makes this laptop special. If you ask me, it's a 16-inch OLED display that goes up to 240 hertz. It has a peak brightness of 500 nits. It supports G-Sync in order to keep your refresh rate equal to your frame rate. So even if you do get dips in performance, you really shouldn't notice them as much thanks to the G-Sync. But honestly, I don't really care about all of the sync stuff. Sure, it might be a better experience, but what I actually care about is how absolutely fantastic this display looks. Because it's OLED, the black pixels are off, which makes Street Fighter 6 even more disappointing with the gray bars. But the colors just absolutely explode off the screen. It's super bright, it looks fantastic. And honestly, the glare really isn't all that bad either. So much so that I don't see myself ever plugging things into the HDMI port on this thing. I have computer monitors here at my desk, which is a 4K LED screen. It runs at 60 hertz. And switching between this display and my laptop screen, it's just really disappointing, to say the least. In fact, I don't see myself ever plugging in anything into the HDMI port of this laptop for any reason. Although I guess I could put other windows on the screen, like a YouTube video or something. But when I'm playing a game on this screen, I don't need other screens distracting me. The screen on this laptop deserves your full attention. It's that good. So if you are looking to get yourself a laptop, and the most important thing to you is how good does the screen look, Well, I gotta say, I can definitely recommend this laptop. So what do you think about this laptop? Performance-wise, footprint-wise, weight-wise, screen-wise? Oh, wait, I didn't actually tell you about the weight. It's 2 kilograms, roughly about 4.5 pounds or so. Let me know what games you would be playing on a laptop like this. Leave it in the comments down below that like button. And if you enjoyed this video, you're probably going to enjoy the latest episode of my podcast, which is called the NerdNest Podcast. And you can check it out right here. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.